Hi, Miss Curdy here, and today we are going to do some additional practice with topic 6-6, finding the area of irregular figures. So in order to do this, it's going to be a 4-step process, and it's definitely a lot trickier than finding just the area of a regular rectangle, because there are more steps. So here's the 4 steps that we're going to do to figure this out, and we'll do these 4 steps each time we get a new problem. So the first step is to create simple rectangles by drawing lines to break up the figure. Little typo over there. To break up the figure. So whatever the shape is, we want to figure out how can we draw a couple of lines to make it into easier to work with rectangles. Sometimes we'll end up with 2 rectangles. Sometimes we'll end up with 3. I don't think you'll run into any questions that actually have 4 rectangles. After we've broken up our shape, we then want to find the length and width of each new rectangle. After we do that, we're then going to find the area of each new rectangle using length times width. And then at the very end, we're going to add up all of those areas to find our grand total and label that with square units. So let's start with our first problem. So we're going to find the area of this shape. Now, when I look, I can tell it's not a regular rectangle because we've got this piece up here. So I want to think about ways I can break it up. So before I show you how I break it up, there's actually 2 different ways we can break this shape up. One, I can draw a line right across here. So I have this little shape up here and then a longer rectangle over here. Or I can draw a line right down here so that I have a long skinny rectangle here and then a bigger rectangle over on this side. You'll notice that we've got some of the sides labeled and a couple of things are not labeled, and that's okay. We may end up with extra that we don't need, or we may need to find a couple of more pieces depending on how we break it up. All right, so here's our step 1. So we want to create simple rectangles by drawing lines to break up the figure. There's my little typo again. So I chose to draw a line right down here. So I've got rectangle 1 over here and rectangle 2 over there. So that is our step 1. I now have 2 shapes. All right, let's move on to step 2. Now I need to find the length and width of each of these new rectangles. Sometimes that's really easy. Sometimes it requires some extra work. So I'm going to actually look at rectangle 2 first. So I always want to be looking at our width and our length of the whole shape. So I couldn't use this as the length right here because it's only one little piece. So I have to look at where the full length is. And right down here, I can see it's this full side, which is already labeled for us really nicely at 3 centimeters. And then I look at our width over here, and I've got 1 centimeter over here. Now I know that with a rectangle, if this is 1 centimeter over here, this is also going to be 1 centimeter down here because our opposite sides are equal. If I have 3 centimeters down this side, I know that this gray piece and this green piece together is also going to be 3 centimeters. Hold on, we're getting ahead of ourselves. All right, so that's 3 centimeters. Now when I look at this shape over here, I can see I have a width of 2 centimeters over here, and that means that this gray part is also 2 centimeters because our opposite sides are going to be equal. If this is 2 centimeters, I know what this side is going to be, and I can figure that out because if I have 3 as a total over here and 2 right here, that this must be 1 because I have to have 3 on each side. So 2 plus 1 would equal that 3. All right, so I've got 2 as my width over here. Now when I look at the bottom, I see that I have 7 centimeters laid out for here. But I need to be careful with this part because this 7 centimeters is for this entire line over here. But now that I've drawn this and broken it up, I only need from this end all the way to this gray part. So I have to take this piece off and not count it. So this is not going to be 7 centimeters anymore. So take a minute to think about what this green line here, from here to here, stopping at this gray point, would be. And we're going to have to use some clues across here. So I'm going to have to use the information up here, knowing that this little piece is 1 centimeter. So if our entire piece is 7 and this piece is 1, what would this piece need to be? And when I think about that, I know that that's going to be 6 because 6 plus this 1 over here would equal our 7. So I'm not using that 7 anymore. So I actually went and put a line through it. So I remember that 7 is not there anymore for me to use because it's for this whole shape and not just this little part. So now I know that this length here is going to be 6 centimeters and over here is 1 centimeter. So now I've got my width of 2 and my length of 6 here, my width of 1 and my length of 3 there. So now I'm ready to move on to step 3, which is to find the area of each of these new rectangles. The hard work is done. Step 2, I think, is the hardest step. So when I look at rectangle number 1, I know it's going to be 2 times that 6 centimeters, which I put over here, 6 times 2, which equals 12 square centimeters. And then rectangle 2 is going to be a 1 times a 3. And I've got that over there, which is 3 square centimeters. So we've got last step, which I think is probably the easiest step. At the very end, I just need to find the total, which would be 12 plus 3 is 15 square centimeters. So the area of this whole shape from the original piece is going to be 15 square centimeters. So we remember when we have a shape like that, our step 1 is to break it up into smaller rectangles. Step 2 is to find any missing side lengths that we need. Remember some information we're not going to be using anymore, like right here with the 7 square centimeters. And we might have to use opposite sides to kind of help figure out what those pieces are now going to be. And then step 3 is finding the area of each new rectangle. And then step 4 down here was just adding those two areas together. So now at this time, there's additional practice. If you go on Envision, you'll see the 6-6 practice buddy. And that's going to give you extra practice. And I like this because it is kind of like a buddy, where after you fill out your answer to each problem, before you move on, there's an option to check your answer. And when you press that button, it's either going to tell you, nice job, you've got it, or it might say that something isn't quite right yet. So you kind of get a little feedback before you move on. In this case, make sure you have scrap paper or even a whiteboard next to you, because you'll need to be drawing every single one of these shapes out on paper first so that you can draw on these and solve them. So go ahead and give that a try and then let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching and have a great day.